actually we actually just finished Global Ergonomics Month in October, and with many employees working from home or working a hybrid arrangement where they're working a few days at home and a few days in the office, we thought it would be a good idea to do a presentation on office ergonomics working from home. So in this webinar, you'll learn some tips on how to set up your home office workstation to help you be more comfortable and productive while working from home. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to post them on the chat. I will check them sporadically, and Anna will also be keeping an eye on those as well. So again, my name is Farzana Ismail, and I'll be your presenter today. I am a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist and the in-house ergonomist with Athletes Care. I've been consulting in ergonomics for over 20 years. At least 80% of my work is in office environments. I usually do office assessments for both work offices and home offices. So I've seen every possible office environment scenario. And also due to COVID, we're all now experts at doing virtual assessments using photos and video conferencing. So just something for those of you that might be staying far, just know that the virtual assessments is an option as well. So the main topics we will cover today are how to improve your posture, regardless if you have a proper workstation or whether you are using a dining table, a laptop, or if you wear progressive lenses. If you're in the market for a new chair, what are some features you should look for? A growing trend in home offices is the use of sit-stand desks, and we'll look at some examples of sit-stand workstations and the pros and cons of each of those, so you're better informed when you are going to purchase any of these products. And are all products that are considered ergonomic good for you? And finally, we'll look at some ways of alternating your posture at home. So before we get into the meat of our topic today, let's first briefly talk about what ergonomics is. So ergonomics is about fitting the job to the worker, not forcing the worker to fit to the job. And this also applies to office ergonomics. So there are three approaches we use for introducing office ergonomics in the workplace. So the first is by providing or using the right equipment and tools for the person that's doing their job. And the second approach is proper use of the tools and equipment that you have. You may have the most ergonomically friendly workstation or chair, but if you don't use it the way it was intended to, you really aren't going to benefit from having the ergonomic equipment. Just today, I did an assessment for somebody that had a height adjustable workstation. And, when I asked them where they were experiencing discomfort, they said, neck and shoulders. But then when observing them, I noticed that the height adjustable desk was set too high for them. So even though they had really good equipment, because they hadn't set it for themselves and what's best for them, they're not really benefiting from having the ergonomic equipment. And then the third approach is movement and stretching. So no one posture is good for 8 hours a day. So this is where movement and stretching comes in. And we'll look at some examples of ways you can introduce changing of posture at home. And when we think about ergonomics, we often associate it with the workplace and fitting the work environment to the worker, but it can also apply to the home environment. And again, with a lot of people working from home now or working the hybrid model, this is really important. So we're now going to go through several principles for setting up a computer workstation. So the first principle is working height. So we have three main heights that we are concerned with, and these are the chair height, the keyboard mouse height, and the monitor height, and we're going to go through each one of these. So a mismatch between working heights and employees may lead to poor posture, discomfort, and inefficient work. So optimal working height can be a bit more challenging to achieve when working from home. So the principle for optimal working height is 90, 90, 90. So a 90-degree angle at the hips, 90 degrees at the knees, and 90 degrees at the elbows. So how do we achieve that 90 degrees at the elbows? That's by ensuring that the keyboard and mouse work surface are at elbow height. This then allows for neutral postures while typing and mousing. That is, the shoulders completely relaxed, like not raising up, elbows at 90 degrees, and then straight wrists. So when the keyboard and mouse surface are too high and too low, this can result in awkward postures or non-neutral positions. So why are these postures problematic? The short answer is that you are not as strong in those postures. Muscle strength is compromised when you're not in a neutral posture. So we want people in neutral positions, as this reduces stress on the muscles, tendons, and bones, thus helping preventing musculoskeletal injury. So let's now look at which body parts are out of neutral position when the keyboard and mouse work surface are too high or too low. So if we look at the picture on the left, when the work surface is too high, the shoulders will either be shrugged or upwards reaching, such as the employee that I observed today. The elbows will be straightened a little bit or extended, and the wrists might be bent backwards. So if you notice that this is the posture you're assuming, then the work surface is too high for you. When the work surface is too low, the elbows will be extended, and again, the wrists will be bent backwards, such as you can see in the picture on the right. So keep in mind that when we are using the computer, we aren't in these positions for just a few minutes of the day. We could be in these positions for a few hours of the day. So that's putting a lot of strain on the body. So desk heights in the office can range anywhere from 27 to 29 inches. At home, we might be working at a work surface that's even higher than 29 inches, such as the dining table. Some of the older desks that were purchased a long time ago were set at heights of 30 inches. So if you're using an older desk, it might be higher than 29 inches. And if we are working at a surface that's too high, where the keyboard and mouse are above our elbow height, we may be raising our shoulders while typing and mousing. So there's two approaches to fix this so that the elbows are level with the keyboard and mouse. So the first option is to raise our seat height, and the second option is to lower the work surface. So we'll now go through both these options. So with the first option, you want to raise your seat height until your elbows are level with the keyboard and mouse on the work surface. So if you look at that diagram on the slide, you can see that the elbows are at 90 degrees and the elbow height matches the desk height. So if your chair is fixed and not height adjustable, I would check around the household if there is a higher chair at your home. Sometimes the dining table chairs tend to have a higher seat height. So another option for raising the seat height is to place seat cushions on your chair. So I usually tell employees to place patio furniture cushions, as these tend to be more sturdy than the cushions you'll have indoors. So don't worry about the feet at this time. Just make sure you adjust your seated height so that your elbows are level with the work surface height. Whether or not your feet are dangling and the monitor height, all those can be easily fixed. So once you've raised your seated height, you may notice that your feet are not properly supported on the floor or that your thighs are sloping downward. So remember the 90-90-90 rule at the hips and the knees. So what you want to do here is to position a footrest at your feet so that your feet are properly supported and your thighs are parallel to the floor. So this is all with regards to option one, which is adjusting the seat height so that your elbows are level with the work surface. So if you do not have a footrest at home, you can use a stack of photocopy paper or sturdy box, or even take a baking pan and flip it over. Just make sure your knees and your hips are at the same level. So try not to use something that's too high. So a lot of times when we're doing ergonomic assessments, we'll see people using overturned recycling bins, and those tend to be too high, placing the knees higher than the hips. So we don't want it to be something that's too high. Just make sure Your knees and your hips are at the same level and thighs are parallel to the floor. We can also use the footrests or makeshift footrests to change our position periodically throughout the day. So you might have a footrest directly underneath your knee joints for a period of time, and then you might push it towards the back of the desk and then just stretch your feet out. So if you don't have an office desk at home, you want to find a table that's ideally between 26 and 29 inches high. Generally, the lower the desk we can find, the better. Sometimes we have to be a bit creative when we are working from home. So most ironing boards are height adjustable. So you could try to do the setup here in the photo on the left. So you want to lower the ironing board to your elbow height and then position an external keyboard and mouse on the ironing board. And then position the monitor or laptop screen on a higher surface behind the laptop, behind the ironing board, raised up to your eye level. And then if you are using your dining table and not looking to buy a new desk, maybe because you just don't have the space at your home, especially if you live in Toronto, you could just install a clamp-on keyboard tray, such as this one shown on the slide, which would require no drilling, and it could be removed in the evenings or weekends. And these are very cost-effective solutions. So for example, the clamp-on keyboard tray is around $70 or $80 in Amazon. So it's a good solution if you're using a desk that's too high or a dining table and you want something that's not going to damage your furniture. You could just put it on when you're working and then remove it when you're not working. So speaking about work surfaces, I do want to briefly talk about sit-stand desks and point out some things for you to consider when selecting a sit-stand desk. So before we get going, I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Are there any questions, Anna? I can't.
No, not right now. I think we have everything answered here. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
We are recording the webinar, and we will be sending that out to anyone that's participating this evening.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first option we're going to look at is the height adjustable electric desks, which are becoming increasingly popular. So let's look at a couple of popular options in the market today. So if we look at the Costco electric desk, this one has a height range of about 27.6 to 46.5 inches. So at the lowest desk height, it is actually too high for some average height and shorter users for seated work. And it actually does not go high enough for tall males while standing. So I actually did an assessment for an employee at a work office. Like many other employees, she's also working the hybrid model, so working 2 days per week at her home office. So she recently purchased this particular Costco desk for home use to share with her husband, who just happens to be tall. So she said the desk worked great for her husband, but it was actually too high for her. And she's only 5'4". And then she tried raising her chair as high as possible so that the elbows were level with the work surface, but the chair did not go high enough. So what did she end up doing? She ended up buying a new chair that went higher, and she also had to buy a footrest to support her feet. So by buying a desk with the wrong height range, she ended up purchasing a new chair and footrest to work with the desk she had purchased. So just wanted to point that out, is that you want to make sure that when you are purchasing a height adjustable desk, make sure you look at the height range and ensure that it does accommodates your seated height for your elbows and your standing height for your elbows. So now let's look at the IKEA electric desk. So this one has a height range of 22 to 48 inches. So compared to the Costco model, the IKEA desk has a better height range and does go much lower and higher. So this desk would in fact accommodate users of all sizes. So when it does come to electric height adjustable desks, the IKEA model seems to be a better option. So that's not to say that you can not purchase the Costco desk. It just depends on your stature, and you just have to buy the desk that suits you the best. So now if we only knew which company, IKEA or Costco, had the better soft serve ice cream, but I think that's a webinar for another day. So what are the pros with sit-stand desks? So the electric sit-stand desk is quick and effortless when transitioning between sitting and standing. If it only takes about 10 seconds to alternate position, then it is likely that the employee will alternate between sitting and standing more frequently, ideally at least once per hour. Depending on which style of electric sit-stand desk you go with, they can come in different sizes and colors, and this is particularly important if you are trying to maintain the aesthetics of your home. Most electric sit-stand desks are rectangular, but you can also get them L-shaped or curved desks for those that need larger desks because of the work that they do. Now, another pro for the electric desks is that in most cases, you can use an existing desk surface and purchase the leg frame only. So this not only keeps the costs down, but allows you to maintain the aesthetics of the work area. So what are some of the cons for electric sit-stand desks? Of all the sit-stand options, these usually tend to be the most expensive option, especially if you go with the model that has a good height range. And then what are some things you need to consider when purchasing an electric sit-stand desk? So first and foremost, consider the height range, especially if you are of a shorter or a taller stature. If you are using dual monitors, or in some cases, 3 monitors, maybe including the laptop monitor, then consider a desk depth of 30 inches. If you use something that's only 24 inches deep, your monitors are going to be very much in your face, and you're actually going to sit further back from the workstation, resulting in you reaching for the keyboard and mouse. So always, if you are using dual monitors or more, make sure you are using a desk that has a depth of 30 inches. And when possible, use an existing desk surface to maintain the aesthetics and reduce the cost. Let's look at crank adjustable desks. So how many rotations do you think it takes to transition from sitting to standing and vice versa? So let's watch the video. Yes, so there you have it. It takes about 90 rotations to transition from seated to standing height. And this is pretty consistent with other crank adjustable desks I've come across when doing assessments. So let's look at this typical crank adjustment sit-stand desk from IKEA. It has a height range of about 28.5 inches to 48 inches. So it accommodates the seated and standing heights for taller users. However, when you lower it to the lowest height of 28.5, it is too high for anyone that would be a shorter or average height user. So the crank adjustment model does not accommodate as many users as its electric counterpart from IKEA. And you may see similar findings with other crank adjustable desks from other suppliers. So let's now look at the pros and cons for crank adjustable desks. These tend to be cheaper than the electric sit-stand desks. So just to give you a comparison, the IKEA sit-stand desks with the good height range, the electric ones, they go for about $5.99, whereas the IKEA's crank adjustable desk is $2.99, so almost half the price. There are also no power requirements, so there is some flexibility with placement of the desks. Okay, so now let's look at the cons. So as we saw in the video, it takes at least 90 rotations to raise or lower the desk to the desired height. So because these desks take so many shoulder turns and few minutes to transition from seated to standing work, so employees may not alternate between seated and standing throughout the day, and instead may adopt standing or sitting for long periods when using this desk. Also, because of the rotations, which primarily originates from the shoulder and elbow, I personally would not recommend this for someone with shoulder or elbow issues. Also, as we saw with the IKEA crank adjustable desk, these desks do not have the same height range as electric desks do, and they do not go low enough for a significant portion of the users. So when it comes to purchasing this type of desk, I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a desk that allows you to change positions frequently throughout the day. Now let's talk about sit-stand converters for use on existing desks. So let's start with the tabletop version, as this is the most common style. So let's first look at the Very. So the Very used to be called VeriDesk, and now it's called Very. It has two tiers. So the top tier is for the monitors, and the bottom tier is for the keyboard and mouse. At the lowest height, the keyboard and mouse platform sits about 1/2 to 1 inch above the desk surface. Given that most desks are about 29 inches high, and assuming the sit-stand converter is sitting on top of a 29-inch high desk, it would have a height range of about 29.5 to 42 inches. So again, at the lowest height, it is too high for all users except for someone that's tall. And even if you look, even in the photo, the advertised photo, you can see the employee on the left. She would have to raise her shoulders to use the keyboard and mouse at the lowest height. And then sometimes at the maximum height, it does not go high enough for taller users. Now let's look at the Ergotron tabletop sit-stand converter, which is the bottom photo. So the big difference between this converter and the VeriDesk or Very converter is that the keyboard mouse surface is a drop-down keyboard mouse tray, so it actually sits below the desk as compared to the Very, where the keyboard mouse surface sits on top of the desk. The other difference is that with this unit, the keyboard mouse platform actually goes 16 inches above the desk. So it can be raised to a height of 45 inches. So assuming this tabletop converter is sitting on top of a 29-inch high desk, it would have a height range anywhere from about 25 inches to 45 inches. So for seated work, it accommodates all users. And for standing work, it accommodates all users except maybe the very tall male. So when compared to the VeriDesk, it looks like the Ergotron is a good option because it accommodates more users. So if you are of a shorter or medium stature, the Ergotron would be a much better option for you if you are looking for something to sit on top of your desk. So let's now look at the pros and cons of the tabletop sit-stand converters. So for the most part, desk converters are the least expensive option, but again, it depends on which style and size you go with. One of the biggest pluses to the converters is the fact that you get to keep your existing desk. The top tier holds the monitors, but it can also be used for writing or referring to paperwork. So now let's look at the cons. So due to limited space, you may not be able to fit everything you need on the converter. So if you frequently refer to files or use the phone, or you want to put your laptop as a third monitor for video conference meetings, there may not be sufficient space to position all these items on the converter. These units sometimes require the user to reach sideways with their shoulders to grab and squeeze a pedal on each side, and then exert some force to lift and lower it. So it may not be a good option for someone who has existing shoulder issues. While this isn't true for all tabletop converters, as we saw with the two examples in the previous slide, many of the models available do not go low enough for shorter or average size users. So if the keyboard mouse work surface sits on top of the existing desk, like the VeriDesk, the keyboard and mouse will be too high, resulting in awkward shoulder and elbow postures while typing and mousing, and eventually lead to discomfort. So what are some things to consider when purchasing a tabletop sit-stand converter? Choose the correct tabletop based on your stature. Also make sure that to check the depth of the existing desk, as most require a minimum desk depth of 23.5 to 26 inches, depending on which style you go with. Now let's look at another less common option for a sit-stand converter, and this is a pedestal version where the converter clamps onto the front edge of the desk. So to transition between seated and standing work, you simply grab the handle you see to the left of the coffee mug in the photo and slide the unit along a track. Now let's see which users it accommodates. So assuming you have a 29-inch high desk, the height range of the keyboard mouse work surface on a pedestal version is about 25 to 43 inches. So as you see in the photo for seated work, the keyboard mouse tray goes below the desk. Therefore, it's no surprise that for seated work, it accommodates all users. However, for standing work, it actually is too low for tall users and sometimes some of the average height male users. So let's now look at the pros and cons of the pedestal sit-stand converter. When it comes to pros, the sit-stand unit clamps onto the front edge of the existing desk, which means it can be installed onto a narrow desks as well. The unit does not require excessive effort to go from seated to standing height, so it's a good option for those even who have shoulder issues. This unit also comes with an optional work surface, which sits above the keyboard mouse platform for placement of paperwork or even your morning cup of coffee. The pedestal version is available for dual LCD screens, single LCD monitors, and also a combination of LCD and laptop use. So looking at the cons, if you look at the price of this unit, which sells now for about $1,300 at Staples, there isn't much difference between the price of this and an electric desk. This unit does come with an optional tall kit, but keep in mind it will only raise the monitors and will not raise the keyboard mouse platform. So I don't usually recommend this type of sit-stand converter for tall employees. So I hope the short review of the 4 different types of sit-stand desks has illustrated that there is some research that needs to go into purchasing the correct sit-stand desk. So if you're looking to buy one and want to make sure you get the correct one for yourself, we can actually help by doing an in-person or virtual ergonomics assessment and providing you with some options that will work for your height. So if you do decide to stand for parts of the day, here are some options that you have if you don't have a sit-stand desk at home. So you can use the kitchen counter, you can use a tall cabinet, you can even use the ironing board. And then if the work surface is too low, as is the case with the man using the ironing board in the photo, you can also prop the laptop on top of books or boxes, which is what the user on the far right has done. And with all the online shopping that everyone is doing these days, I'm sure it shouldn't be too hard to find a box. The goal is that we want to make sure that the keyboard and mouse height are level with the elbows. That's the ultimate goal. And here are just some guidelines if you do decide to incorporate standing while you're working from home. The principles are the same for sitting and standing. So we want the keyboard and mouse at elbow height. When we're standing, we want to make sure we're wearing supportive footwear. Probably not as much of a concern at home as in the office. We're probably not wearing heels at home, but just make sure you've got supportive footwear on if you are going to be standing. We want to change our positions often. So the guidelines recommend that we sit no more than 30 to 60 minutes at a time, and we stand no more than 15 to 20 minutes at a time. So we're basically changing our posture at least every hour. And just like if you were starting a new routine at the gym, you wouldn't go lift 100 pounds right off the bat. So we sort of have to build up our tolerance to standing. We might start with standing just 10 to 15 minutes at a time, maybe 3 times a day, and then gradually increase this. So the next principle is the chair. So let's look at how the chair should be set up. So seat height, as previously mentioned, if you are working at a high work surface, you want to adjust the seat height such that the elbows are level with the keyboard and mouse on the desk. If after raising the seat height, the thighs slope downward and or the feet are unsupported, then you would use a footrest. This would allow you to achieve the 90 degrees at the hips, knees, and elbows. And then if you're working at a height adjustable or you're able to lower, you have a lower height work surface, such as a keyboard tray or adjustable desk or even the ironing board, then you want to just adjust the seat height such that the feet are planted on the floor and the thighs are parallel to the floor. And then when it comes to the seat depth, you want to make sure that the distance between the back of the knees and the front of the seat pan is the size of a fist or 2 to 3 fingers. You want to make sure that the lumbar curve on the chair's backrest fits the small of your back. If you have an adjustable back angle, you want to adjust the backrest to allow for a 90 to 110-degree angle between the upper body and the thighs. So 90 degrees would be sitting completely upright, and then 110 degrees is a slight bit of a recline. This is also a bit of a personal preference, but the idea with this one is that we should be able to sink back comfortably into the chair and still easily reach the keyboard and mouse while maintaining our shoulders relaxed, elbows at 90 degrees. And then when it comes to armrests, these should be level with the elbows. So the rule of thumb is elbow height equals armrest height equals work surface height. Armrests that are too high will cause your shoulders to shrug while using the keyboard and mouse. So you can see that in the photo on the slide. The elbows are level with the armrests, and then the top of the armrest matches the top of the work surface. So that's how you should be positioned. So keep in mind that regardless of the chair that we have available to us, the goal is to support the body. So if you are looking to purchase a chair for your home office, here are some key features that you want to look for. At a bare minimum, you want to ensure that your chair has a seat pan that is height adjustable, has good lumbar support that is also adjustable so that it can fit into your lumbar curve, and ideally a waterfall seat pan edge, which just means that the seat slopes downward at the front, so there's no contact pressure under your thighs. And in the CSA Office Ergonomic Standard, recline and tilt features are important because they do recommend having a chair that allows you to move through multiple postures throughout the day. If you're somewhat restricted in your budget, ensure that the seat pan size that you select allows the majority of your thighs to be supported and that there is a 2 to 3 finger gap behind your knees. So as long as the seat pan length fits you, then you don't really need seat pan depth, but adjustability. So that cuts down on the cost a little bit. Armrests and inflatable lumbar support are nice to have, but are not necessarily required. And with regards to headrests, we typically only recommend them if someone has a pre-existing neck injury. Again, if you need help determining the right chair for you, please reach out to us to do an ergonomic assessment. A good chair can cost almost $1,000 or sometimes more, so you want to make sure you are getting the right one for you. Now, if you don't have an office chair and are not looking to buy one, we want to try and pick the best chair we can find in the house. So at the very least, make sure your chair has a backrest. If the chair is not height adjustable, as mentioned before, you can use a seat cushion. Patio cushions work best to raise yourself up so that your elbows are level with the keyboard and mouse on the work surface. And then just make sure you are using a footrest or a makeshift footrest so that your feet are still properly supported. If the chair has limited or no lumbar support, you can roll up a towel or sweater to position it in the small of your back, just like you see in the photo on the right.
Farzana,
Yes.
we have one question in regards to the lumbar support.
Okay.
Jenna has asked, do you recommend the use of an obus form lumbar backrest support added to a computer chair?
So if you are going to use an obus form cushion, so there is the one that's a full back obus form, and then sometimes there is a Velcroed lumbar pad that sticks on it. Okay, so if you're using that obus form one, you want to make sure you can put the obus form cushion on your chair and then make sure you position the lumbar pad in the right position in the small of your back. The one thing you want to keep in mind is if you're going to put a backrest cushion or a lumbar roll or a lumbar pad on your backrest, make sure that that gap behind the knees is still the size of a fist or 2 to 3 fingers. If by placing a backrest cushion or a lumbar roll in the small of your back, it pushes you a little forward, and now you have a gap that's 4 inches behind the knees, then that's a concern, because now you've lost a little bit of leg support and your back has to work harder to keep you on the chair. So make sure you find you are using a lumbar pad or obus form cushion with the lumbar roll that can be repositioned. Make sure you're using lumbar support that's not going to push you too far forward. That's now going to make your back work harder. So just make sure that you still have that size of a fist gap, no more than that. And then you're good to use the obus form cushion on the chair. I just quickly check if there was any other questions. Okay, so it looks like we're good, right, Anna?
Yes, that was our last question. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the next principle is the keyboard. So again, I already mentioned that we want the keyboard position at elbow height. So you have heard me talking about that so much, keyboard and mouse at elbow height, because majority of your issues will go away if you set up the keyboard and mouse at the right height. So if your keyboard is at the recommended elbow height, you'll have that 90 degrees at the elbows and your forearms are going to be horizontal to the floor. If your keyboard is too low, the elbows and wrists will be in an awkward position. And if the keyboard is too high, then your shoulders will be raised while typing. If you are using a laptop, the CSA standards recommends that you use an external keyboard to ensure that you're able to get both the proper monitor height, which we'll talk about soon, as well as the proper keyboarding height. And then if you don't have an external keyboard available, but you are using an external monitor, what you can also do is fold open your laptop all the way and then just use that as a laptop keyboard. So here are some other tips for positioning your keyboard. So because of the asymmetrical design of your keyboard, if you've got the number pad on the right side and you center the entire keyboard with your body, you'll end up reaching across your body to use the alphabet portion. So what we recommend is shifting the keyboard over so the middle of the space bar is lined up with your belly button. Okay, so that's how it should be properly positioned so that your wrists are not in awkward positions when typing. So if you're looking to purchase a keyboard, now is a good time to consider some other options. So with a standard keyboard, especially if you have more of a petite frame, you'll end up having quite a reach past the number pad to get to the mouse. So that's when you position the middle of the space bar lined up with the belly button, then your mouse is going to be further away. So if you don't really use the number pad, you can consider a keyboard without a number pad or a keyboard with a separate number pad that you can move to either side. There is now even some smaller keyboards with the built-in number pad for those employees that still use the number pad. So if you look at the top photo, the white keyboard, that's a keyboard with the number pad. But this keyboard is 2 to 3 inches shorter in width compared to the standard keyboard. So it's a good option for those who have right shoulder issues, who still use the number pad, and you want to minimize the reach to the mouse. And then there's even natural keyboards, such as the middle photo, which may be a good option for those that may have forearm or shoulder issues. So the next principle is the mouse. So keep in mind that each time you click your mouse, your index finger is performing a muscle contraction. So it's estimated that the average office worker clicks their mouse 5,000 times a day. So mousing is a very repetitive task. If you do a lot of scroll wheeling, again, that's a lot of work on the index finger. So if the mouse is too small, you might be over gripping, and all these things can lead to fatigue as the day goes on. So the CSA standards say the same thing for the mouse as they do for the keyboard. If you're going to be using a laptop, it is recommended that you use an external mouse. Using the laptop trackpad for prolonged periods can result in static, flawed posture, which we want to try and avoid. So a couple of tips for operating the mouse. We want to position the mouse at the same height as the keyboard at elbow height and as close to the keyboard as possible. We want to try and keep a comfortable, relaxed grip on the mouse. So try shifting your hand slightly up on the mouse so that the palm of your hand is resting on the back of your mouse as opposed to on the desk. We want to try and avoid having any contact under the wrist. And imagine that your wrist is somewhat fixed. We want to try and avoid that side-to-side movement and keep the wrist straight while we are mousing. So we want to pivot about the elbow versus pivoting about the wrist. So you may have heard that ergonomists tend to recommend mousing with the left hand. So what are the benefits of left-handed mousing? Some of the benefits of left-handed mousing are that it allows us to share tasks more evenly between right and left sides, especially if you're right-handed and you find you do everything with your right hand, your right side never really gets a break. The other benefit of mousing with the left hand is the reduced reach to the mouse. So when mousing with the right hand, the number pad is in the way, resulting in a slightly far reach to the mouse. You don't have that problem when you mouse with the left hand. So if you are going to make the switch to left-handed mousing, a few things are required. So you'll have to make sure that you have a symmetrical shaped mouse and not one that's curved for the right hand. You'll have to reprogram the mouse for left-handed use. So this can be done through the mouse settings on your computer where you would select right for the primary mouse button. And the last thing you'll need is patience. It does take 2 to 3 weeks to learn a new habit. You will work slower at first. You may experience a bit of discomfort on the left side because you're not used to that fine control, but eventually that should go away. So if you're looking to purchase a new mouse, just ensure that you're selecting a standard size mouse or larger if you do tend to have a larger hand to ensure that it properly fits your hand. So you want to try and avoid what a lot of people are selling out there as compact and travel size mice. These actually tend to lead to over gripping, and it just means our hand has to work harder to operate the mouse. So some other options you have are left-handed mice. Another option is a roller mouse that sits in front of your keyboard, like the top left photo, and it has a scroll bar across the top, and you have to use both hands to operate it. So that's good for somebody that may have shoulder issues. Vertical mice just puts your hand into a more neutral position, neutral handshake position. So if you find you have discomfort when you turn your palm down, then this is a good option to consider because usually when you use a regular mouse, your palm is facing down. So if that position hurts you, but the handshake position does not, then you want to consider a vertical or a natural mouse. Trackball mice are good for someone who has discomfort gripping a mouse, as the trackball mouse completely eliminates that grip. We actually don't recommend thumb trackball mice, as these result in thumb issues eventually due to repetitive use of the thumb. So you'll see the trackball that we've included in the photo there. That's actually used with the fingers and not with the thumb, and it's also symmetrical, so you can alternate using it between left and right-handed use. So keep in mind that the further we move from the standard mouse, the greater the learning curve. So anytime we try new equipment, we might experience some initial discomfort. If that discomfort goes away, that's a good sign. If it doesn't, then maybe the equipment you're using isn't the right fit. So just be aware of those symptoms again. So now let's look at principle 5, which relates to monitor setup. So here's your ergonomic fun fact for the day. The human head weighs about 10 to 12 pounds, similar to the weight of a bowling ball. So anytime we move our head out of neutral position, whether it's bending forward, backward, sideways, our neck muscles are balancing a 10 to 12 pound bowling ball on our head. So that's quite a bit of strain on the neck. So this is why it's very important to position the monitor or laptop monitor correctly so as to avoid these awkward neck postures. So how do we want to position the monitor or laptop monitor? The top of the screen should be at eye level. A lot of times I'll go do assessments and people are under the impression that the middle of the screen has to be at eye level. No, that's not the case. The top of the screen should be at eye level. Our eyes naturally scan down, so anything that we position above our eye height, we may have to tilt our neck up to see it, and we want to try and avoid that posture completely. The monitor also needs to be directly in front of the body, and the middle of the screen should be lined up with the belly button and approximately arm's length reach. So this is based on if someone's using a single monitor. So the rule of thumb is belly button lined up with the middle of the space bar on the keyboard, lined up with the middle of the monitor. So there's different ways to adjust. I will talk about dual screens in a second, so before someone asks about that. Okay, so there's different ways to adjust the monitor. There's all kinds of monitor stands and monitor arms out there. And if you're working from home and not looking to purchase any equipment, again, you can use a stack of photocopy paper, a box, books, and use as many as you need to raise the screen up to your eye level. If you wear bifocals, the guidelines for monitor height are a little bit different. So you'll have to ask yourself, do you view the screen from the top, middle, or bottom of the lens? If you view the screen through the bottom of the lens, your monitor needs to be lower than your eye height. And in terms of how much lower, basically to the point where you're able to view the top of your screen while your neck is in neutral position, that is not bending backwards like in the photo. Sometimes it's a bit challenging to get the monitor to the right height with bifocal use. And if you're finding that's the case for you, there's the option of dedicated computer glasses. So this is something you can speak to your optometrist about. So when it comes to dual monitors, the first step is to determine the usage of the monitors. Do you use them equally, or do you use one more than the other? So approximately 70% of the time. If you do use one monitor more than the other, you first position the primary monitor directly in front of the belly button and the middle of the space bar, and then the secondary monitor should go to the immediate right or left, depending on which eye is dominant. So the diagram on the left shows the setup for someone who has a primary and secondary monitor. So the primary monitor is used maybe 70% of the time. So the primary monitor is positioned directly in front of the belly button and the middle of the space bar. And then because the user is left eye dominant, the secondary monitor is positioned to the left of the primary monitor. The diagram on the right shows the setup if you use both monitors equally. In this case, you position the monitors such that the V shape, or where the two monitors meet, that's in line with the belly button and the middle of the space bar. So what are some issues with using a laptop? If you use it as is, the keyboard is too high, the monitor is too low. And that's because we can't separate the keyboard and monitor. So if your laptop keyboard is at the recommended elbow height, which we keep talking about today, the monitor will be too low. And if the laptop monitor is raised so that the top of the screen is at eye level, then the keypad is too high. If it's a smaller laptop, the keypad can be quite compact, then we end up with our arms squished beside us trying to use the keys. And if the mouse pad is in the middle of the laptop, the wrist ends up being cranked to the side while mousing. And if the laptop has a thick edge at the front, we can have contact pressure under the wrist. So there's a lot of issues when using the laptop, and that's why it's not recommended for long-term use as is. So what options do we have when using the laptop? We can either raise the laptop monitor so that the top of the screen is at eye level, then use an external keyboard and external mouse. And we can use a laptop riser, such as the one in the photo. We can use a sturdy box, books, or stacks of photocopy paper to raise the laptop monitor height. If we have an external LCD monitor, we can fold the laptop flat and then just use the laptop keyboard and an external mouse. So this is just an image of the ideal workstation setup when using a laptop with an external keyboard and external mouse. You'll notice that the top of the laptop screen is at eye level and the external keyboard and mouse are at the recommended elbow height. So when talking about the chair, we recommended that the armrests are level with the elbows, and you can see that in the photo as well. So we talked about working heights. Working reaches are important as well. The area within your forearms reach is considered a prime real estate. So basically, you're going to have to ask yourself this question: what do I use most often? So typically, when I'm on the computer, that's going to be your keyboard and mouse. So these are going to be within forearms reach. If you are going to be doing paperwork, you may want to move your keyboard and mouse out of the way and position the keyboard paperwork in front of you. So basically, whatever it is we're using at that particular moment, make sure that that's within forearms reach. You'll also notice in the photo on the top that when the keyboard is positioned too far, we no longer have that neutral, relaxed shoulder posture, and our elbows are extended. So by placing the keyboard close to the edge of the desk, we can adopt more neutral positions with the shoulders relaxed and maintain that elbows at 90-degree angle. So the last principle, and probably as important as the first, is movement. The human body needs movement to keep it comfortable and to keep it healthy. And because we probably don't have the same equipment at home as we do at the office, maybe it's not as adjustable. Movement is even more important when working from home. So these are some recommended guidelines for movement. Try to take breaks from your computer work every 1 to 2 hours. And that just means alternating your tasks. If you have some telephone work or paperwork, try to split it throughout the day so you're not just doing computer work for 8 hours straight. At least once an hour, try to stand up and move around. You can also stand while taking your phone calls or meetings where you might not need to keep your video on. The 20-20-20 rule is for the eyes. So that just tells us to change our viewing distance every 20 minutes. So look out the window. For those working from home, I'll tell them to take their laptop to the kitchen counter, for example, during meetings, webinars, or e-learning courses where they might not be actively using the computer. And finally, use your work breaks to stretch, rest, or change positions. So we do have this stretching infographic, which we will share as well with whoever attended today's webinar. So before ending the webinar, I just wanted to provide some general guidelines for purchasing equipment. First thing you should ask yourself, is this a good tool or is it a gimmick? There's so much equipment out there and it's hard to know what is going to be a good fit and what might be a marketing scheme. Unfortunately, there are no guidelines for calling a piece of equipment ergonomic. Oftentimes the price is high and makes us believe that it must be good, but ask yourself, does this piece of equipment improve my posture? Can it be adjusted to fit me? And is it really required? Do you really need to have a $120 footrest, or can the stack of photocopy paper just work just as well? So I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found this webinar informative and helpful. And I'll just check if there's any questions on the chat.
Thank you, Farzana. We do have, there was one question here, the last one from Megan. If there are any recommendations for neck support?
Okay, so when it comes to neck support, if you're talking about something like a headrest, okay, so it does, you give me a little bit more details. Let me see. I have a herniated disc and I work hard to ensure but struggle. Okay, so because you have a diagnosed medical condition in your neck, I would say the headrest is useful. You'll note, you can't see because of the background that I have, but I do have a headrest on my chair, but you don't have to use it all the time because then it kind of throws out your gait a little bit when you're working. But it is good to have there to provide some relief. So let's say you're in a meeting or whatever, and you would just want to take a breather. You can just rest your head intermittently, but you don't have to use it all the time. And then depending on the chair that you have, if you do have an ergocentric chair, you can actually add a headrest onto the chair. So depending on the model of the chair you have, it could be something that you can add on. But yeah, if you do have a diagnosed medical condition in the neck, I would say it is a good option for you just to periodically be able to rest your neck every now and then. And then it looks like there's another question. My employer has provided ergo assessment to accommodate the sit-stand desk I purchased. They provided a chair that goes to a higher height, and they recommended a keyboard tray. However, due to my desk dimensions being would fit due to the desk control panel, what can I do as an alternative, as my desk is about an inch higher? So I'm very familiar with ergocentric chairs, so you'll see me keeping on talking about ergocentric chairs. If you do have an ergocentric chair, you can change out the piston on the chair to go with the higher gas lift. The other thing you could do is try the clamp on keyboard tray, which just kind of clamps onto the front, so there's no track underneath the desk. So that would be another solution as well, is to use a clamp on keyboard tray one versus one of those height adjustable ones that needs the track to go onto the undersurface of the desk. So I hope that helps. Do you have any preferred brands for chairs? Like I said, I like ergocentric chairs. Global Ergosform chairs are also good. And then I've actually tested out branch chairs. They're more cost, they're a little bit cheaper, but they're not as good as the ergocentric global Ergosform chairs, but they're a good option as well. Can we review this presentation again? Yes, the recording will be available. Could you elaborate more about the stretches? Okay, so the stretches, basically, we do recommend doing them 3 times a day. And they're not these stretches where you have to get onto the floor and do that. You know, they're ones that would be considered embarrassing. There's the ones you can do at your desk, seated. They're just simple ones. So I can do one right now just to demo how long you should be holding it for. But basically, you want to just hold your neck. You want to pull it down until you feel a little bit of a slight stretch. And then you want to just hold that for about 10 seconds. And then you would just release and then do the other side. And then you want to hold that for about 10 seconds. So there's that infographic that we're going to share with you has about 6 or 7 stretches that you can do at your desk. And I would just recommend doing those about 3 times a day. So going to the gym doesn't count as the stretching for the office. So make sure you do your stretches. Was there any other questions? If anyone wants to spit them out or put them on the chat, we'll answer them. And it looks like we don't have any more questions. Is that, oh, there's one coming in. Oh, it's just, okay, it's just a thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, I hope you found this useful, and I'm just going to put the last slide up, which actually has some other resources, but like I said, this will be in the recording. And then there is my contact as well. If any of you would like to request an ergonomic assessment or have any more, require any more information, feel free to email me at that email address right there. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, go ahead, Anna. I know you're going to close.
Yeah, no, I was just going to thank you again for all your information. And if we don't have any other questions, then I think we are good for this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day, good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Farzana.
Thank you.